I just hit 709 with this game, and I am so excited to show you guys this one because I feel like it was a very random game that I have no idea what my opponent was playing, but it's fairly exciting. So I play e4, standard opening, e5, straightforward. I play my king's gambit denied, one of those two openings, and I play a check here. Now this check isn't so good, but at least it makes him chase my bishop out, and I get my bishop to safety. He still tries to chase it with one more move, which was a bit of a mistake on his side. I played knight to f3, which is just basically trying to rewrite my knight this direction. But the only problem with doing that is my bishop's still blocked on that line. My pawn is still needs to move one square forward before anything can defend it. This bishop is in danger of being attacked by one more move. So what does my opponent do? He plays a4. Now a4 does put my bishop under pressure, but I do have one last final desperado to throw it into the f square. So I play that. Exactly what I played. I was not expecting him to take with the king. I was expecting to either king forward or something like that, but I guess he didn't want to lose his knight. I'm not too sure, but he does that. So my next move was to just start creating a pawn chain. Now the engine says that this was a terrible move, but you know what? The engine says what it says. I don't care. So my next move, after opponent plays c5, I just continue my pawn chain. Now the engine once again says this is terrible. Now my idea was to plant the knights on a square where I can probably get a check. The only problem with this is that the queen was beaming down there. But if you remember a move before, that was not possible. So with this move, the queen can no longer go to that position because she gets lost. Without that move, if I had to move my knight here with a check, queen can take, and I take the queen, doesn't matter. King's in a much better position, probably move out the way, and then now develop as he sees fit, whatever, what my plan is, I don't know. Anyways, I play f5, he plays g6. And then what? Stevie Boots, what do we do from here? Knight check. Where can the king go? The king only has a few options. There's nothing that can defend for him. Queen can take, but bishop takes. And then he's just a queen down. So best option would probably be queen to the g2, g7 square. Sorry, I'm thinking backwards. What does he do? He moves the king forwards. What does this give me? Not much. I can play queen to f3. General idea is if I play that move, then most likely he will start moving his pawns forwards. Who cares where they go? Doesn't really matter. But I decided I want to bring in another piece, so I moved the knight forward. The knight being forward, it gives a chance for him to attack it. And I was presuming this b4 would come forwards. And I didn't think he would actually play it, because I thought if I can put something under attack that's not defended, I might as well attack it. So I thought he would move that piece forward, but he did not. He moved c4. What happens with c4 if you move it forwards? That gives my knight an outpost square. But let's not forget, my knight was illusionally attacking that piece, so I took it. 3b. The engine says it is now level. Well, -3 to black. Or +3, however you see it. The general idea is now the engine says I am losing. I do not think that I am losing at this point. I believe that I still have a good opportunity for my queen, my bishop that is beaming on this diagonal, to finish this king off. Not only that, we have a knight that is limiting the king from the squares it can go to. So instead of being like, okay, cool, I'm under pressure, I take the knight and he decides to, sorry, I take the pawn and he decides to attack my knight. The engine sees the same plan as me, pretty sure. Knight d4, just kidding, it will be taken by the pawn immediately. So I decided to hop back to c3. c3 opened up a new vision for me. All of a sudden, I saw a chance to win this game. I'm going to pause it for a second. You guys, do you see it? Pretty sure you do by now. No matter what move he plays, and he ended up playing knight c6. Now, what does knight c6 do, you say? Can't put the knight here or here. Defends this square or this square. No pawn move forwards. Knight can't jump here. Be attacked immediately from positions. Who knows? I don't know. The king can take it. Very easy piece to take. Knight position, I like it a little bit. It defends this pawn. But what my opponent did not see is knight d5. Well, the problem with knight d5 is that the king's now in check. This piece cannot be taken. It's still defended by the bishop. I have no idea why my opponent moved his king into f6. But I guess he had a plan. So I took the opportunity and I played myself knight d5. The king, therefore, had to move to a different square. This square, blocked. This square is taken by my pawn. This square is protected by my knight. This square is protected by my knight. No, it's not. It's this one. So the king literally only had one move. There is no other way he could have defended this king. And he played that move. Now, the way that my brain was thinking is that this was an impossible game to win at this point. His king is fairly safe. Yes, my knights are attacking it, but there is no way for me to move forwards. But then I thought of an ingenious move. What if I played f6? f6 puts him in check. Knight is defending that square. There is no other piece here that can take it. I did not see the knight that was defending that square. I just played it anyways. And my opponent did not see that he could take with the knight. And he played king h6. I played knight to f7. Winning the game with checkmate. What an incredible journey this game was. It got me into my 700s. So it might not be the greatest game. I got myself into 700, which is fantastic for me. And I'm really proud of myself that I made it to this point. Boys, this was one of the record-making games for me. Still in the 700, almost about to go to 800. And they play e4. I decided to go for the Sicilian defense. We have a London. I played knight f6. Played pawn forward. I decided to attack the bishop. I was very surprised he didn't do the trade. It would have been pawn takes, excuse me, pawn takes, pawn takes. If he goes forwards, yes, bishop takes, and I have a good position. But he decided to move his bishop back. I moved my knight back. He pawned forward. I closed the position. Put another pawn forward. A little bit interesting, and I decided to develop, attacking the bishop. He did not move the bishop, attacking my knight, so I just took the bishop. I didn't see a reason why not to. He took with the a pawn. Now the problem with taking with the a pawn is it can be very well defended because the rook is still behind. So I pushed to a5. He decided to attack my pawn. I defended it with the b pawn. He pushed his g pawn. I decided to take on b6. before, which put him in check. He defended with a pawn, creating a nice pawn wall along file, and I moved my bishop back. I didn't see a point in losing material over there. So he played forwards with b pawn onto b4. At this stage, I wasn't too sure whether I wanted to move the queen forward, move the rook, castle the king. I had a lot of options that I could take, but the only one that seemed logical to me was to defend my c pawn. So I put the bishop forwards. He moved his knight. This was, I think, the first mistake that he made. Yes, this pawn structure is terrible, with a very random pawn structure. So I decided to rumble things a bit. So I pushed my h pawn to h6. He took, which was part of the bait. I wanted to open up the line because I was not planning now to castle my king. I don't know if he saw it or if he did not, but he ended up playing knight g3. After knight g3, I decided to pin the knight to the king. Hopefully it wouldn't be able to move. He decided to defend it with the rook, which is fair enough. But the only problem with that is that I did not care that the piece was defended. I'm just glad that it can no longer move. Beautiful wall here that I cannot penetrate just yet, but the weakness is on h2. The most important thing for me at this point was to create some sort of counterplay. Now this bishop move later on in the game becomes a very crucial move, even though it can be blocked by this pawn over here. If that pawn blocks it, I take the pawn. If the next pawn blocks it, I take that pawn. He played queen g4. Now queen g4 made me a little bit nervous, I'm not going to lie. Why is the queen in my territory? Although, on his side. Where was the queen planning to go? Can't attack this square. There's no reason to go there. Attacking that pawn will just get eaten. Moving down here, probably the best option. I think knight in this position would have helped him a lot more with whatever his plan was. But he could not move the knight because it was pinned. So my curiosity says, why didn't he just take this piece? Well, he would have lost his queen to my queen. So I moved my queen forward just to make sure that I can defend these pieces over here. And to make sure that this pawn does not move forward into the square. We move the queen into g7. Now g7 is a little bit of a pressure situation. Now, I'm sitting in the situation where I'm very confused. What do I do? Now, the first thought that I had was, let me just take the knight. The knight puts him in check. So he took with the rook. I feel like this was a semi-genius moment where I realized I have a tactical plan here. Now, it was in order for him to fall into this trap. He can take my rook, which puts me in check. I have an escape, which is excellent. And that's exactly what happens. But I did not realize that the eval bar would go this low at this point. But the craziest part about this point was that when I got checked, I decided to move to knight d7 at this point, and the computer says that queen g8. It's one of the best moves. My only option at this point is probably take the pawn on 2. But there's a mate in 2. I'll give you guys a chance to find it. Find it. Queen to f7. Check. My king only has one of 2 moves. d8 or c8. Now if I go to c8, it's pretty fairly simple. Checkmate. If I go to d8, fairly simple. Checkmate. The game is over. But that doesn't happen. So, after queen takes, I move my king to e7. He moves the pawn forward, which was the biggest mistake he probably could have made at this point. So I take the pawn, which was an even bigger mistake for me because he has a very simple check forwards. But he does not play that move. Instead, he plays bishop f4, losing the game on the spot. If you guys see it, let me know in the comments. If you don't, the bishop is beaming down onto e2, leaving only one final move for me, and that is queen e2. Checkmate. GG. What a great game for me. I don't know how I managed to survive this, but that is the power of the Sicilian defense. I don't know how I managed to get out of the trap that his queen was putting me in, but at the end of the day, that is why you should make sure you always check for checks. This is why you must always check for back rank checkmates. So let's get started. We start with e4. e4 is met with d6. Very interesting opening. It's not an opening that I know, but anyways, I followed up with d4. e4, d4 into a d5. I decided to close the position. After closing the position, he played his knight forward. Attacking and defending, I played my knight forward to attack and defend. He played his pawn forward on e6, which closes the position officially. And I decided to play the bishop to attack the knight that was defending the king. And hopefully he wouldn't be able to move that piece. Of course, at this point, the best thing to do is to attack the bishop. But he did not. He decided to defend with his own bishop. So I took the knight, he took my bishop. I played bishop out to attack the queen because it is defended by my knight. He decided to defend the queen with a pawn. 100%, no problem with that. I move the bishop back. He puts me in check with a bishop. I could have probably just moved c4 forwards, but decided to defend with the knight. At this point, he should probably just take, but he decided to retreat. This was the first mistake that I saw from his point. If he just took, at least we would have been even on material. I castled because I was free to do so. I was no longer under check, so I can castle. And he played a pawn move forwards. Now in a closed position like this, having a flank pawn doesn't really help you too much, because if this pawn even moves one more square forwards, it is under attack. There is nothing to defend the piece. Perhaps he was deciding to move the bishop towards the side, but there was no square that was available for it. I am very confused on why he moved there. So I played my pawn forward. The idea of c3 was to go to b4. The idea of b4 was to eventually push to attack this bishop. The reason why? His queen side is a little bit weaker than his king side at the moment. He played queen forwards into d7. d7 gave me the opportunity to realize that this queen and bishop is pretty much stuck together. The queen has no good moves. So, the blocked off queen, what do? Attack the position. I push the pawn forwards. What did he do? In retaliation, he decided to castle on the side where all my pawns are rushing to. This was a big red flag for me. Now, there was a lot of things black could have done in this position. He could have played the bishop forward, attacking my queen, puts him in a much better position that if, for example, I took the queen, he can take back. If that didn't happen, he could probably just play a lot of different moves, but my move came first, so ignore everything I just said. So I played pawn to a4. My pawn to a4 looks a little bit dangerous because if he takes, I take back with the rook, not with the queen. Then he takes with the queen and I take back with my queen. That means that this square is now undefended at all. He could have put the pawn forwards at this point and then decided to defend this king somehow. Maybe getting the king out or the queen forwards, but if the queen was taking a position there, then the king would have had a room to escape. But unfortunately, none of that happened. He pushed these, a6 pawn. Now, if there's anything I have learned from any video I've ever watched, is that if a pawn is pushed on a square where your rook is, attack that pawn. But my idea when I was playing this game was not to attack the pawn, it was to attack the bishop. And the queen, why not? So I pushed my b5 pawn. Well, I pushed my b4 pawn to b5. Now, there were a few options that he probably had here. The bishop was trapped. There was no doubt about it. But the best move he probably could have done was to take with the bishop, let my pawn take, and push his pawn. At this point, I would have been delayed by at least one move, and it would have not been checkmated. I took with the rook. At this point, I am stopped in my tracks. He can push this pawn forwards, giving his king escape squares, and if I went to the back, there is no checkmate. Yes, I can take the rook, but at the end of the day, he is doing much better. Unfortunately, none of that happened. So he pushed the pawn, I pushed my pawn. He took my pawn, I took his. Decided to take back with the bishop, thinking it was safe because this attacks my rook. Wonderful position that he has, but forgetting one small detail. There is no one defending here. King has no escape. He is smothered. Lining up the rook on a1 to a8 ends the game. Did I see it? Of course I did. I am not just any 800, I am the best 800 you will ever see. Aiming to get to 1,000 this year. I'm so excited that I've got this far on my adventure, and I'm very close to my goal. Stay tuned, we'll see if we make it. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you guys want to see more content like this, make sure that you stick around. Hit that sub button. Hit a like for the algorithm. Leave a comment letting me know if there's anything else that I could have done to make this position better. And I'm always learning, and I love learning about this game. Chess. Goodbye.